Greetings, brothers and sisters. We'll be discussing some very crucial information which has profound implications for those awakened ones. Now, understanding that we are now at the time of the end, when the Creator will bring about the end of the beast kingdoms, along with their destruction, as foretold by the word of truth, that this world would become corrupted and defiled in the end by Babylon. Discover that history also repeats itself, and there are many patterns and cycles that we go through, like the wilderness journey. See some comparisons between the days of Noah and the rise of the second beast relating to knowledge. You will discover the deeper meaning behind the Great Awakening, that this was foretold by the Spirit of Elohim, and we are personal witnesses to this testimony in our lives. You discover that mankind is now being brought to a crossroads where they are forced to make a choice, and depending on your decision and who you have put your trust in will depend on your salvation. Now discover the meaning of the lampstand and what this represents, and who are these two witnesses and the olive trees, and what does it mean to keep covenant, and why is this a serious matter. Finally, discover what we need to be keeping to ensure you enter the promised land, paradise. Now we will see also another exodus, this time from the power of Babylon. Now consider these words and how this is reminiscent of the exodus in Egypt. In Revelations chapter 7 verse 9 it states this: "And after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all the nations, tribes, and peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands." Now we have a mixed multitude here, exactly as we saw in Exodus chapter 12 verse 38. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock. And there will be forgiveness and protection to those who wash their robes, meaning purify their minds and body, the temple, in the great tribulation. Let's consider carefully. We are told there is nothing new under the sun, meaning whatever has been will be again. Like history repeats itself. We've all heard this in our life. Now Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9 speaks about this. And also Yeshua tells us in Matthew 24 verses 37, it says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." So, in other words, business as usual. It looks exactly as it was in the days of Noah. Now, if we observe carefully what occurred in those days, we'll see very clearly it parallels our times. In Enoch, it describes that knowledge was given to mankind. Let's give consideration to what is spoken in Enoch chapter 8. And it says, "And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of anatomy, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all the coloring tinctures. And there arose much godliness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all the ways. And Samjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Amaris the resolving of enchantments, and Parajaquel taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations, and Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, and Arakiel the signs of the earth, Shamsiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven." Now, this is really quite amazing, because if we observe, we see that we have weapons of war. Now, is there any different to our times? with the military industrial complex and all these wars that are being fought for wrong motives, political gain, and the stealing of the earth resources. We also see the formation of the control of mining and metals, some of the biggest industries in our times. And also, we see that mankind became corrupt, meaning his mind. So we can see that these earth resources are controlled by a very small group of elites who have raped and pillaged this earth for financial gain and control. And likewise, we see Babylon and Satan's kingdoms, the rise of the fourth beast, and this final, the second beast in Revelation 13, we see that once again knowledge was given to mankind. And once again, at the end, humankind becomes corrupted and defiled, just as it was in the days of Noah. So you see, wisdom understands these matters. Now I'd like to draw our attention to what has become known to many of us as the Great Awakening. Have you asked yourself what the meaning of all this is and why now? First, let us observe that leading on and up to these events, many of us started to question about everything around us, such as conspiracies, secret societies, UFOs, space, underground bases, and so on. Just about every other topic I would normally dismiss without thinking rationally about, I started to consider. I found I had a hunger and a love for the truth, and I wanted to know everything. I discussed this in my testimony, what I described as a twofold awakening. Not only did I have a spiritual awakening, meaning I realized that the congregations, the assemblies I was trying to be a part of, were corrupted. But also, I woke up to the lies and the deceptions this world is based on. I started to see that things, as they really are. And through this process, it was revealed unto me by the wisdom of Elohim that this is all foretold. Now I would often think to myself that there must be a meaning to all this. Why is this happening to me now? I pondered these thoughts inside because I knew inside me that there must be a reason and a purpose to all this. I knew that everything was connected to the word of truth and my solid belief in the Creator and Yeshua, and this was my house built upon a solid foundation. Now, let's read the following words in Daniel 12. The Creator revealed the meaning of these words. And many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, but others to shame and everlasting contempt. Then the wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever and ever. Many will be purified, made spotless, and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. Now the Creator gave me the meaning and the understanding of these passages. And these words are deep and profound because they are prophecy, and they are speaking to us. They speak about the time of the end when the books will be unsealed. And I'm talking about the book and the prophecies of Daniel and Revelations, meaning they could not be understood until the appointed time, and they are for us and for the awakened ones. And this is the exact time of the refinement for the elect. Now, this is spoken of in Revelations chapter 3 verse 18. It says, I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so that you may be rich, and white garments, so that you may be able to clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness may not be seen, and salve to anoint your eyes, so that you may see. And this is what the awakening is all about, being able to see clearly what is going on. We have all been on a journey seeking and learning the truth. And most importantly, we need to understand where this truth comes from. We are told that some will awaken to everlasting life, but the others to shame and everlasting contempt. What is the meaning to this? Well, if we consider many have been awakened, both believers and non-believers alike, many have been pursuing their own truths without acknowledging the Creator and Yeshua, who has come to testify to the truth. And they have explained away these matters to themselves without realizing that it is the Spirit that is revealing these truths in these times. Now I remember these words in Luke chapter 8 verse 17. It says, "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open." And has this not been the case with the Great Awakening? So much corruption, so much lies and deception has been revealed. And also in Acts chapter 2 verse 17, consider these words carefully. He says, "In the last days, Elohim says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people," meaning everyone upon the earth. It says, "Your sons and your daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, your old men will dream dreams." Now this contempt that he speaks of in these words in Daniel, and this is the disregard for something that should be considered, such as the Creator, Yeshua, and the Word of Truth. Now, understanding the following is paramount. Everything is prophecy, and that these events were foretold ahead of time. That the Creator already knows the end from the beginning. He knew those who would seek Him, those who would be able to think for themselves versus those who would ignore the facts or seek the truth. And of course, those who would believe the lie and never come to the knowledge of the truth. And this really has a lot to do with cognitive dissonance. When you have been lied to all your life and you've been indoctrinated, it is very difficult or very hard to actually change your mind or opinion, even though facts are being presented or the truth is being revealed. And this is a sad state of the human mind. And we're also told the following in Psalms 14. "Jehovah looks down from heaven upon the sons of men to see if any understand, if any seek Elohim. All have turned away, they have together become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one." So you see, the Creator is looking down upon the sons of men to see if anyone understands, or anyone who seeks the Creator. We are told they have all turned away, they have become corrupted and rejected Him. Now that is a sad state of affairs. Let's take a walk with me. I want to show you what I see through the eyes of wisdom that the Most High has revealed unto me. We will discuss the only hope and protection mankind has in this final hour, in the window of time which is running out. We will be discussing the Old and the New Covenant, what this means, keeping covenant, and what is the will of Elohim, and who are these two witnesses and why they are important. Now this hope has everything to do with keeping covenant and all the Father's 10 Commandments. Now stick with me please for a moment as I will prove this from the Word of Truth. Now before we discuss these matters, let's consider carefully what I'm about to remind you of concerning the end times we are now living in. In the Word of Truth, it states clearly that everything would become corrupted and defiled in the end. Even the Messiah warned us. He said, "Let no man deceive you," because deception would be so prevalent in the end. He also told us that there would be many false messiahs, prophets, teachers, dressed in sheep's clothing, but inside they're ferocious wolves, no different to wild beasts. We are also told they would bring the Word of Truth. It is spoken in 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 2. Many will follow their depraved conduct and will bring the way of truth into disrepute. And also they'll get around themselves around the table many teachers and say what their itching ears want to say. So in other words, they have corrupted the word of truth. But you see, Elohim has hidden his wisdom in the word, which is incorruptible. This corruption has everything to do with the mind of man, the transgression of the original state and the order laid down by the Creator. Their behavior and understanding would diminish. Is it any wonder that everything is corrupted now in the end? Are we not witnessing this, brothers and sisters? But this is all prophecy and was foretold ahead of time. All because mankind rejected the Creator's wisdom. He was warned not to hearken to the serpent, who has planted knowledge from the tree of good and evil. This is referring to Satan, into the minds of the people. And through these lies and deceptions, he has corrupted their minds. And we are told that their thoughts were continually evil all the time. Messiah warned us that this is exactly what occurred in the days of Noah, and it would be no different in the end. What do we observe in the days of Noah? Well, we see that only one man was found righteous in those days. Now, if behavioral scientists can map out the human brain and can understand how to control and to manipulate human behavior, just consider that the Creator, who is the designer, the master builder, knows all things, and he is in complete control of all events. We are told a man reaps what he sows. Now, with these things in mind, let's consider carefully why the Old Covenant was broken in the first place, and why the Israelites never entered that promised land. We are told this was due to disobedience, and because they corrupted their ways through Babylonian idolatry. Even the Creator knew this, but they would not be reformed. Now, it should be noted that the Creator never broke his covenant with the Israelites, but his people did. They broke it twice. Now, this was symbolized by the jeweled tablets of stone that Moshe received twice from the Creator. Now, the new covenant was founded on better promises. We are told that the Messiah is also a mystery because he represents the new temple, the new man, the mind of wisdom. The Creator foretold this in the Old Covenant in Jeremiah 31. In verse 31, "Behold, the days are coming, declares Jehovah, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares Jehovah. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Jehovah. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each one of them teach his neighbor, and each his brother, saying, Know Jehovah, for they all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares Jehovah. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more." Now I want you to observe carefully what is spoken here. This new covenant is with the house of Israel and Judah. And remember, it is the spiritual seed of Abraham, which is the Messiah, and he is the head, the body. And also in Romans chapter 2, verse 28, we read, "For no one is a Jew who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward and physical, but a Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. His praise is not from man, but from Elohim." And also in Galatians chapter 3, verse 29, says, "And if you are Messiahs, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise." So you see, this new covenant is by the Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. And I also note something very important. It is the same covenant meaning the 10 commandments that Moshe received. They were to be written on the hearts, the minds of the people, by the Ruach HaKodesh. Now remember that the word is spirit, and it is the same spirit given to the born-again believer in Messiah. And what did he say in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 25? He says, "And if we are careful to obey all this law before Jehovah our Elohim, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness." So you see, our righteousness is to carefully obey all his law. And he's speaking about the 10 commandments. Jehovah spoke these commandments in a loud voice to your whole assembly out of the fire, the cloud, and the deep darkness on the mountain. He added nothing more, and he wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. Now, it is also Yeshua who's the one who confirmed this covenant with mankind, and we're all grafted into this olive tree, which is the Messiah. Now, brothers and sisters, I do not need to remind you of the following, that this new covenant was confirmed on the exact same day, Shavuot, as the Creator established the old covenant with the Israelites. We're talking about these same 10 commandments. In like manner, this 50th day marked the establishment of the new spiritual man, this new covenant, as confirmed by the Ruach HaKodesh to his people. This is fulfilling his promises as he declared in Jeremiah 31, where he would put his Torah, his 10 commandments, into the hearts and the minds of the people. Now, when we consider so many people have despised his commandments, and what did Babylon do instead? We see that the serpent has enslaved humanity through acts and statues. Now these are the instruments of law in Babylon. We see there are thousands and thousands of these acts, and they have their own language, legalese, clearly designed to entrap us. Now, these laws are being created to control and enslave humanity. But you see, the people did not rebel or complain against these, even though they have been deceived the people into slavery. Now, it should be reminded that the Creator gave mankind only 10 commandments and 10 fingers so we can count them on. In fact, 1 John 5:3 states, "This is love for Elohim, to keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome," meaning not restrictive or difficult to keep. And also we're told in 1 John chapter 2 verse 3, "By this we can be sure that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. If anyone says, 'I know him,' but does not keep his commandments, he is a liar, and the truth is not in him." Now let's think about that. We're told that if anyone does not keep his commandments, he is a liar, and the truth is not in him. I ask you, brothers and sisters, are you teaching that you do not need to keep the commandments? Because we are told that if you do not keep the commandments, you are a liar, and the truth is not in you. Now that's quite a big warning, brothers and sisters. And also, in verse 7 it says, "Beloved, I'm not writing to you a new commandment, but an old one, which you have had from the beginning." You see that the Creator is very consistent. What he utters is law, and he does not change his mind like humankind. His word is his bond, and the word is spirit and truth, and his promises are eternal. Now in Joshua 21 verse 45, not one of all Jehovah's good promises to Israel failed. Everyone was fulfilled. Now that's the Creator, the mighty one we serve. He keeps his promises. And in Ephesians chapter 5 verse 17 it states, "Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of Jehovah is." Now, his will is to keep his covenant, his 10 commandments, because you see, Yeshua confirmed the new covenant with his own life. He paid for our transgressions with his own blood, poured out upon the altar of the covenant, those 2 tablets of stone, paying the price for our transgressions. Now, a will comes into effect when someone dies. That is why it states in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 16, in the case of a will, it is necessary to prove the death of the one who made it. You see, that's why we're told in 1 John chapter 5, verse 8, there are 3 that bear agreement, the Spirit, the water, and the blood, and the 3 are in agreement. Now, is it any surprise, brothers and sisters, that Ron White has witnessed to this truth, where the Creator has chosen Ron to bring to life the 10 Commandments again in our times? Ron also is a witness to this and discovered the blood that was poured out upon the tablets of stone, confirming the testimony and the witness of the covenant. These are the exact same commandments as our forefathers broke. Brothers and sisters, now that we understand these matters, we see that this is paramount that we keep our agreement and covenant with the Creator. The Creator has hidden many mysteries in His Word. Kings were to search out these matters. We will now look at this mystery surrounding these 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands. Now, I want to point out that word there, lampstand, is actually the word Menorah. And the menorah is the 7-branch lamp that lit up the temple. So keep that in mind. Now also, the root word of menorah is the word ner, which means a lamp. And that's quite important that you keep that in the back of your mind, because you'll see that we'll break down who these 2 olive trees represent and the 2 lampstands. Now I want you to notice that the 2 olive trees are first mentioned in Zechariah 4, and there's 1 solid gold menorah discussed. And we see also in like manner we have these 2 olive trees, and they are mentioned in the book of Revelations. But we see there are 2 menorahs. Now, this is highly symbolic and has much deeper meaning. And it is all to do with the wisdom of Elohim. But something we should notice is that the Creator has always got 2 witnesses. And we'll observe that His works are always in 2s. Now in Ecclesiasticus chapter 33 verse 15 it says, and look upon all the works of the Most High, there are 2 and 2, one against another. Now I wanted to just point out something quite obvious when it's pointed out, but let's observe this pattern of 2. We see there were 2 trees in the garden. We have Adam and Eve. We have Cain and Abel. We have Isaac and Ishmael. We have Yaakov and Esau. We also have Israel and Judah. And we see that Moshe, and we have Yeshua, because Moses represented the Old Covenant, and we see that Yeshua represents the New Covenant. And also there is a connection between Solomon and Yeshua, and it has to do with wisdom and the temple. And of course we have the first temple and the second temple. And let's not forget the 2 tablets of stone, the 10 Commandments. And there were those 2 angels above the mercy seat of the covenant. These are 2 witnesses. And of course we have the 2 covenants, the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. That are just some examples of the works of the Most High, but there are so many more. Now, the Creator did say that everything must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. And that's first discussed in Deuteronomy 19, verse 15. And also it is the same practice in the New Covenant. Now, for sake of time and duration, we will try to get to the heart of this mystery, and we'll begin in Zechariah 4, and we'll read some key verses. And it's important to have context around Zechariah 4. We see that this conversation is occurring between the angel and Zechariah, the prophet. And this message that is being discussed is all prophecy. So remember that. Prophecy is speaking of current and future events. Now, we have Yeshua, the high priest, We see he's the spiritual leader of Israel, and he's also the high priest. And we'll observe that he's also the anointed one. That's important because when we understand that Yahushua means Jehovah is salvation, and the short form of this name is, we have the name Yeshua. Now, that's very interesting. And also we have Zerubbabel, who is the governor of Judah. So we have the leader, the spiritual leader, Yahushua, and Zerubbabel, the governor. Two different witnesses again. And I want you to observe that Zerubbabel means the one that is sown in Babylon. Now that has a deeper meaning also. Now let's read Zechariah 4, and we'll just read verse 2. And this is when the angel is speaking. Ask Zechariah, what does he see? And he responds, I answered, I see a solid gold lampstand with a bowl at the top and 7 lamps on it, with 7 channels to the lamps. Also there are 2 olive trees by it, one on the right of the bowl and one on the left. Now, I want you to observe that these 2 olive trees represent the earthly witnesses. And I'm referring here to Judah and Israel. And we see that both Judah and Israel are olive trees. And they're spoken of in Hosea chapter 14 verse 5, and also in Jeremiah chapter 11 verse 16. Now, also observe, we see that there is this golden menorah, and it has 7 lamps on it. And this is talking about the temple, and the light symbolizes the light of the world. And we see there are these 7 channels to the lamps. And this is the bridge between the heavenly realm and the earthly realm. Now let's keep that also in mind. Now, in a bit later in verse 6, we get a response to what exactly this represents. I remember this is a spiritual vision that Zechariah has been given. And in verse 6 he says, so he said to me, this is the word of Jehovah to Zerubbabel, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says Jehovah Sabaoth. So you see, we're told that Zechariah sees something that is spiritual, and it has to do with the temple. And we also see that this represents the spirit of Jehovah, and it's not by power or by might, but by his spirit. So we see that this represents his spirit. So keep that in mind. Now also, in verse 19, it confirms that it is to do with the temple. It says, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this temple, and his hands will also complete it. Now we're going to pick up in verse 10. Who dares despise the day of small things, since the 7 eyes of Jehovah that range throughout the earth will rejoice when they see the chosen capstone in the hand of Zerubbabel. That's very interesting. Now, this chosen capstone, we know, is referring to the Messiah. And we see these 7 eyes, these 7 spirits, and we'll talk more on that a bit later, but understanding that these spirits represent wisdom. Now, we'll pick up again in verse a bit later on in verse 14, and we're told, so he said, these are the 2 who are anointed to serve Jehovah of all the earth. So we see, we have Yahushua, which means Jehovah is salvation, and we also have Yeshua. We see that they are both high priests, and they are both anointed as kings. Both are involved in the building of the temple, and we know that the temple is our bodies, our minds, where the Ruach HaKodesh resides. Now that we've laid the groundwork for who these 2 witnesses represent, we can begin to comprehend what is being discussed in Revelations chapter 11, verse 4. We can see again these 2 olive trees are mentioned, and this time notice there are 2 menorahs. What I want you to observe is that they are witnessing and prophesying. Now, symbolically, this is the fulfillment of what is written within the word of truth, the prophecy that was written about the lives of these people. Now keep in mind that this is deep, and it has to do with the people who are witnessing to these events during their lives and during these times. Now we're now at the end of this age, and all prophecy is fulfilled, and we are witnesses to this truth. Now these two olive trees represent the house of Israel and Judah, who are his people. Now let's not forget that the new covenant was with the house of Israel and Judah, and we're talking about the spiritual seed of Abraham, the Messiah. Now in Galatians chapter 3 verse 29 it states, if you belong to Messiah, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Now these two menorahs, this is highly symbolic, and remember that this represents the spirit of Elohim, and we know that the spirit is the word, and it is representing the old and new covenants, because there are two witnesses again. Now we know the menorah is the word, the root word there is the word for the lamp. Now remember that the lamp was to be within us, because we are to light that lamp, the light of the world, which is Yeshua. Now it says also in Psalms 119, 105, it says, your word is a lamp for my feet and a light on my path. So you see, it is referring to the word, which is spirit. Now also we have these two witnesses, the two tablets of the covenant, the Ten Commandments. And we see that in Revelations it speaks that they are prophesying and witnessing for 3.5 days. And this is highly symbolic, and it's where we get a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years are like a day. Because you see, it is approximately 3,500 years they have been witnessing and prophesying. And this is when the Ten Commandments were given, approximately 3,500 years ago. That's quite amazing when we consider this. But what do we see? We see that the breath of life, when they have finished witnessing, right? What do we see? We see that the breath of life from Elohim entered them, and they stood on their feet, and terror struck them who saw them. And then it says, they heard a loud voice from heaven saying, come up here, and they went up to heaven in a cloud while their enemies looked on. Now, in verse 19, it tells us, then Elohim's temple in heaven was open, and within his temple was seen the Ark of the Covenant. And there's a mystery also within this as well, because this is alluding also to the resurrection. Now that's really quite amazing. Now also, while I was meditating on the Ten Commandments and their connection to these two witnesses, the Spirit drew my attention to what is known as the Transfiguration of Yeshua. Now I want you to notice something amazing here. This event took place after 6 days, meaning 6,000 years after creation. And symbolically, we see that this is the time of entering that 7th day of rest. And we can also see here this is alluding to the resurrection. When we will all see his glory and splendor. Now it is spoken in Matthew chapter 17, and also Mark chapter 9, and in Luke chapter 9. Now I would often wonder what the deeper meaning to why Moshe and Elijah are present at this significant event, along with Peter, James, and John. Now, if we observe, we see this is a witnessing pattern again. There are 3 earthly bound witnesses, and we see there are 3 resurrected witnesses. Now, as I was meditating more and seeking understanding on this matter, the Spirit revealed that this was reminiscent of the encounter that Moshe had with the Creator on that sacred mountain, Jabal al-Oz in Saudi Arabia, in times past. This event was so important that the Creator personally visited his people, and through Moshe, his servant, he received the conditions and the terms of the agreement, his covenant, and I'm referring to the Ten Commandments. Now, what do we observe here in this case with Yeshua and Moshe and Elijah on this mountain? Well, we see that Yeshua's face was radiant like the sun, and his clothes was white as snow. And we see in like manner, when Moshe came down the mountain, his face was radiant and glowing also, after receiving the 10 Commandments. Now, both Moshe and Elijah are witnessing to the fulfillment of everything the Creator was planning to do, and it has to do with Yeshua and wisdom. And remember that Yeshua is the new Adam, the new man. And also that this covenant was around these 10 Commandments that would be written in the minds of the people. I'm referring to the area of the mind, the temple, which is where the Spirit resides. And that's quite amazing. Now, remember also the Creator did tell man in Deuteronomy chapter 6:8, and thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and thou shalt be as frontlets between the eyes. Because you see, everything's so much more deeper. So let's keep that in mind also. Now, it is through observance and keeping of the 10 Commandments, which is all Elohim's wisdom. And we're told in Sirach chapter 1 verse 26, if thou desire wisdom, keep the commandments, and Jehovah shall give her unto thee. So you see, wisdom is the light of the world, and it is through wisdom, which is the heavenly spirit, the set-apart spirit, that gives life. And I would like to speak also about why Elijah was present. And this is quite amazing also. When we notice that apart from Moshe, Elijah was the only other person to have gone back to that sacred mountain where Jehovah gave the 10 Commandments to Yeshua. But also Moshe and Elijah both represent the Torah and the prophets. Both were advocates for keeping the covenant and the 10 Commandments. Now, when Elijah went back to that sacred mountain, he had a very similar experience to Moshe, and he met the presence of the Most High. And having heard that still small voice speak to him, is recorded what Elijah spoke. And let's keep these words in mind in 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 14. And he said, I have been very zealous for Jehovah Elohim of Sabaoth, because the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, your people, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. So you see, what's quite amazing is that we see that Israel and those kings at that time have all forsaken the covenant, the 10 Commandments. And now they are bound down to Baal. And Elijah is the only one left, and they are seeking to kill him also. But you see, this is reminiscent also of what they did to Yeshua. So what a perfect witness, both Moshe and Elijah, to be present there with Yeshua. Because you see, that light that is within, that was radiating from Yeshua, is wisdom. And she is the light of the world. Now, in summary, we can see how important it is to keep in the covenant. Yes, his 10 Commandments. And these laws were to be sown in the minds of the people. And through obedience and through the renewing of the mind, we were to plant the root of wisdom. Now we see that the works of the Most High are in twos, but the Messiah was to unite both these groups, Judah and Israel, into one olive tree. Now in John chapter 15 verse 7 it says, I am the vine, right? The olive tree. You are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. Wow, that's deep. Now, we can see also there's as I mentioned, the deeper meaning of the Menorah and these 7 lights, symbolizing the light of the world, his wisdom. Now we know that Yeshua is the Word, and the Word is Spirit, and it is the Spirit that gives life. And in John chapter 1 verse 14, and it says the Word became flesh and tabernacled. And that word Mishkan means dwelling place, the temple which is our mind, our bodies. And also in Proverbs chapter 6 verse 23 it says that for the commandment is a lamp, and the teaching is light, and reproofs for discipline are the way of life. And this is all wisdom. And also in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 27, it states this. It says, the lamp of Jehovah is the breath of Adam, meaning humankind. And listen, searching all the inner depths of his heart. And this is referring to the Spirit. And this is the deeper meaning of the Menorah and the 7 assemblies discussed in Revelations. We see that in Revelations chapter 1 verse 20 it states the following: the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and of the 7 golden lampstands is this: the 7 stars are the spirits of the 7 assemblies, and the 7 menorahs are the 7 assemblies. So you see that this number 7 is representing the 7 spirits of Jehovah, which is his wisdom. And we notice this number to do with 7 because you see the number 7 is to do with completion and perfection, and it's wisdom that makes us perfect. Now, what do we observe about these 7 assemblies? You see, these assemblies are representing the people. We see that they all lack something except for the Philadelphia, right? The assembly of people that referred to in Philadelphia. We see that this word means brotherly love, and they have endured patiently. Now, that's quite deep. But we see all the other churches lack something. Now also, we should observe that Yeshua has access to the minds of the people, and he knows your thoughts, your motivations, and your actions. Now, also, we are warned in Revelations chapter 2 verse 5. It says, consider how far you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. If you do not repent, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place. Now you understand that the lampstand represents the Spirit that we were given. Meaning he will take his Spirit from those people and they will not have eternal life. Revelations chapter 22 verse 13. I am the Aleph and the Tav, says Jehovah Elohim, who is and who was and who is to come, the El Shaddai. Now, it's ironic when we think, at the time of the end of the beast, as foretold by Elohim, the word of truth, we see that the beast has its own 10 commandments written on stone. Now, I'm referring to the Georgia Guidestones. I'm sure everyone may have read these at some point in your life, but let's observe something very interesting here. There are 10 statements written upon those stones in several different languages. And there were 4 large upright stones because there were 4 beasts. And now we're in the 4th Industrial Revolution. That's all quite amazing when we consider these facts. Now, the Creator gave his commandments and instructions on how we were to live upon the earth. And we see that the beast is also got his 10 commandments, and they're not in the best interest of the people. Now, I want to read the very first 2 lines, and we'll notice something very interesting here. It says, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. And number 2, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Well, what are these? Well, these are eugenic terms. Now, consider, not only did the Creator foretold the end and the demise of the beast, but he also told us the exact means by which the beast would destroy the people. Now, of course, I'm referring to the mark of the beast here. I want you to read Revelations 18, verse 22. It says, the light of the lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of the bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's important people, and by your sorceries all the nations were deceived. As of course, it's talking about Babylon, and we know Babylon is referring to America. But this Babylonian system, that really is the beast system. Now, that word sorceries there in the Greek is the word pharmakia. And we're told it is through the pharmakia that the nations were deceived. Now that is truly quite amazing. Why? Because mankind rejected the Creator's 10 commandments, which were perfect, and they are his wisdom. Now, is it any wonder that the mark of the beast is received in like manner as the Creator told his people to keep his commandments? They were to be written on the minds of the people. So we are told in the Old Covenant they were to be like frontlets, right? Right there where your mind is, where the temple is, right? Where the Spirit resides. We're to meditate on these laws, because you see, through meditation on the laws, he gives us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. So that is the requirement. Now, also in Solomon, chapter 11, verse 16, it states that they might know that wherewithal a man sinneth, by the same also shall he be punished. So if you live by the gun, you die by the gun. If you reject the commandments, then you die by the same means. Wow, that is quite deep when we consider that. So ponder on those words carefully. They received the mark of the beast in their heads and hands, because that's where the beast takes control of their minds, you see. Now, consider also, we are now at the time of the end. The 12th chapter of Daniel speaks about these matters, the Great Awakening. And we're told there are those who awake to eternal life, but there are many that go to shame and everlasting contempt. Now we're also told that the wise will lead many to righteousness, because wisdom comes from the Spirit of Elohim, and it is through wisdom man is saved. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 25 is very clear. It says, and if we are careful to obey all this law before Jehovah our Elohim, as he has commanded us, that will be our righteousness. So if you want to be found righteous before the Creator, before Yeshua, then you want to be keeping all his law. And I'm referring, of course, to the commandments that were to be written in the mind of the people. So keep that there in your mind. Now, it is also the 12th sign of the zodiac, Pisces, the fisher of men. And we're at the end of that age. And this is the time of the sealing of the 12 times 12, the 144,000. It occurs at the end of that 6th day. Now I want to read also from Ecclesiastes chapter 12. This is the book written by Solomon. And I want you to consider that Solomon was given wisdom by Elohim. And we see that it was through wisdom that the first temple was built. Now, remember that Yeshua was the son of David. Well, who was, he's meant to be the son of David. Now, we know that Solomon was the son of David, and it's wisdom. It is an allusion to wisdom, because you see, Yeshua is the new temple. And the temple has to do with your mind, your body, and the spirit. Now, when we consider that Solomon was given knowledge and understanding, and this was bestowed upon him, and we see the marvelous things that Solomon did, and the amount of knowledge and understanding that he had. But what do we see with Solomon? Well, we learn that in the end, Solomon learned one very important lesson. And this is spoken of in the 12th chapter in verse 12. And of course, Ecclesiastes means Kohelet, which is teacher, because wisdom is our teacher. And we read, and furthermore, my son, be admonished of making many books. There is no end, and much study is weariness of the flesh. This is the end of the matter. All had been heard. And he said these very important words. He said, fear Elohim and keep his 10 commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For Elohim will bring every work into judgment with every hidden thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So consider that. That's amazing. Out of all the things Solomon learned, the most important thing he said is to fear Elohim and to keep his commandments, because he learned that from wisdom. Now, also, we are warned in the word in Matthew chapter 12 verse 42. It says that the queen of the south will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. So think about this. The queen of the south will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to listen to Solomon's wisdom. So you see, she had actually come to hear wisdom because she acknowledged that wisdom is very powerful. Now we're told there is something greater than Solomon is here, because you see, Yeshua is Elohim's wisdom, and Yeshua is very powerful. Now finally, brothers, I want you to leave with these words. In Hebrews chapter 4 verse 9, it says, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of Elohim. For anyone who enters Elohim's rest also rests from their own works, just as Elohim did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience." You see, the Israelites never entered that day of rest because of disobedience. And in like manner, we see there is going to be people that will not enter the kingdom also for that very exact reason, because of disobedience. And also, consider, at this time, we're told by prophecy in 2 Baruch chapter 48, "For there shall not be found many wise at that time, and the intelligent shall be but a few. Moreover, even those who know shall most of all be silent." So in other words, we're told that there won't be many wise at the time of the end, and the intelligent shall be but a few. And that is a really testimony to mankind, because we see that mankind has become corrupted and defiled in the end, and everything has become far from its original intention for what the Creator determined. And this has a lot to do with the fact that man has rejected wisdom. And it is wisdom that builds the new temple, and her number is 7, signifying perfection and completion. And she is also the one that builds the temple, the mind. And the new man, Yeshua, is the mind of wisdom. Now, we will end with this very important words of wisdom. I want you to understand how profound and deep wisdom is. Her knowledge and counsel are beyond our comprehension. We just know in part. What I want you to reflect on is this very important message. It is about the 4th commandment. Now, this is the only commandment that the Creator has commanded us to remember. There's a reason the Creator said to remember this commandment, because hidden in this commandment is His wisdom. Observe carefully what is so important about this commandment. 1, it has the seal of Elohim in it, which is His name, title, and territories, the Creator of the heaven and the earth. Also, in this commandment is the right to enter back into paradise, that true day of rest, the eternal kingdom. Now consider, we have the 4th beast who has the mark of slavery, and we have the 4th commandment that has the seal of Elohim in it, and the right to enter paradise, that true day of rest, freedom. Now, it is also symbolized this day as the 7th day, because symbolically this represents the creation of the world, the 7-day week cycle, but also the completion and the perfection of all things, His wisdom. You see, the Creator knew this commandment would be neglected. In fact, He wrote the end from the beginning, demonstrating how powerful His word, His wisdom is. He knew this would be considered the least of the commandments. Now consider carefully that Adam and Eve lost the kingdom because of disobedience and listened to the serpent. 1 commandment, they were cast out of the garden. Likewise, one very important commandment, the 4th commandment, we were commanded to remember. See, the Creator has given mankind a way back, and it has everything to do with keeping covenant, all these commandments, and being obedient to Him. Now, in Matthew 24:45, it says this, "Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household, to give them their food at the proper time?" Wisdom chapter 3, verse 1. "But the souls of the righteous are in the hand of Elohim, and no torment will ever touch them. In the eyes of the foolish they seem to have died, and their departure was thought to be an affliction, and their going from us to be their destruction, but they are at peace. For though in the sight of men they were punished, Their hope is full of immortality. Having been disciplined a little, they will receive a great good, because Elohim tested them and found them worthy of himself. Like gold in the furnace, he tried them, and like a sacrificial burnt offering, he accepted them. In the time of their visitation, they will shine forth and will run like sparks through the stubble. They will govern the nations and rule over the peoples, and the Lord will reign with them forever. Those who put their trust in him will understand the truth, and they, faithful, will abide with him in love, because grace and mercy are upon his elect, and he watches over his holy ones, the Kodeshim.